Welcome to Rules of Villainy, where three new trading card game players venture to become competitive players and discuss their opinions on Disney's Lorcana. I'm Villain Vince, joined by my two hosts, Villain Andy and Villain Brad, aka the Mayor. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey Vince, how are you?
What's up?
Doing well. Yeah. All right. Well, we've got a packed show today, and so we're going to move right on into Underworld news. So did you see, guys, that they released this D23 set? So D23, big Disney event that comes out every 2 years. And the first time was before Lorcana even came out. And now they're releasing another 6 exclusive cards. One from each set that has been released, including Shimmering Skies and yet an unnamed Chapter 6 set. Yeah, pretty crazy.
Crazy. For my wallet, that is.
Yeah. Good luck getting that at MSRP.
Yeah.
Should be in love. It should be in love with that Mickey because I love that card so much. But that set 6 Oswald is something I'm eager to play test. It looks like a lot of fun.
It does look like a lot of fun. And with that price, $99, we'll say, though, I don't think this is going to go for as expensive as the other set went. And people will be able to find this on August 9th at the D23 Expo if you're lucky enough to go. One day I will go. But if not, no worries. You can pick it up at Walt Disney World or Disneyland or even the Disney store in Times Square, which is where I'm hoping to pick up a set from one of my friends. I'm going to beg him to go to Times Square and I'm be like, get this set. It'll probably be sold out, so I won't get it. But
that would be so cool. I hope you get it.
We'll see.
Pick up 3.
Yeah, hey, you can pick up 3 of them. Yeah, actually, you know what? I'll ask. They probably do limit at one.
I was seeing online a lot of people thinking that it was going to be a limit of 2.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry you didn't get 1, Brad. I'm really sorry.
I might do that. The only thing I'll comment on it, and we'll move on to the next topic here in our underground news, is that I do like how these foils are the kind of the DLC enchanted versions versus the D23s that happened last time, which were just basically foil cards, right? The exact same with the D23 logo. So I think these actually do have a little bit more special value.
Yeah, definitely.
But with that, we got a crazy card. Well, we don't have a card reveal, but we're going to discuss. One day we'll get that card reveal. Hey, Ravensburger. Please give us a card reveal. But Podcana last week, Rochelle, I'm sorry I beat you at the game. I just wanted those promos. Give us a card reveal. But no, Podcana revealed a really interesting card. Brad, do you want to tell us a little bit about that card?
Yeah, it's really interesting to me as a Sapphire player. It is Mufasa, the ruler of Pride Rock. He is an 8-cost uninkable, which is a big cost, but he has an attack or strength of 4 and a body of willpower of 9, and he has a quest count, a lore. I'm messing up every single one of these as 4 lore on his questing. He's a Storyborn character, a mentor, which I'm still interested if they ever do anything with the mentor characters, and a king, which has its perks in some locations and such. But what's the most interesting about this card to me is his A Delicate Balance ability. Is when you play this character, you exert all cards in your inkwell and then return 2 cards at random from your inkwell to your hand, which I think is the first mechanic of removing ink from anywhere, let alone yourself. But you get to recycle your ink, which is some strategy to that, I think, in the future. And one other thing that he does as well is everything the light touches. Whenever this character quests, ready all your cards in your inkwell. So I got a lot of thoughts about it. I want to start with Andy, though. What do you think? You've played a lot of Sapphire.
I mean, it is a very spicy card, to say the least. Like you said, the first time we return ink from your inkwell into your hand or to anywhere, really. There's no ink banishing. Initially, my first thoughts were kind of that's a negative. You're losing a couple ink. But I've heard a couple takes and I thought it over, and I think it can actually be kind of swung to be a positive, especially later in the game when you have plenty enough ink, or in the scenarios where you have something like a fishbone out and you can just simply put that ink back in the inkwell if it's not cards that you want. It means that you can feel a lot more comfortable about inking Tamatoas, fishboning away
Yes.
cards like the Lucky Dime. It opens up a lot of avenues, and then just readying all the ink in your inkwell, especially again in a ramp, a color that has the ramp mechanic, is just going to simply mean you have 20 ink. Well, now you have 40 ink this turn. So
Yeah.
like, do you have enough cards in your deck to even support that? Is part of the question, I would argue. Um, what about you, Vince? Are you excited to play against this?
Be prepared. Nobody should love that. I'm sorry. I'm not a singer, but what I will say is like, yeah, I mean, I think it is a spicy card. But I do think, if you're gonna overcommit to the board at this point in the game, there are a lot of risks to taking that strategy as a Sapphire player. So I think it's definitely a spicy card. I'm sure, you know, this is the one card I'm confident. If it doesn't work, people are going to try to make it work.
Sure.
This is a card people are going to test. They're going to figure out. They're going to see, does this work? Does it play? And I mean, I think the one key component is that this is one, it survives Medusa. So that's a good thing with, unless they've got Ice Block, which we do see played in the Sapphire Ruby decks right now. And then I think the other thing for it is that you can be strategic in how you play this. So if you've got, say, a Fishbone Quill on board and you've got a Dime on board, and you have an inked, you could play this at exactly 8 ink, get 2 cards back, ink a card, Fishbone Quill a card, and then tap your Dime for 4 lore. And that's a huge gain no matter what at that point. And then you just kind of this like what I would say is a win more condition if it survives the next turn. But yeah, I think this is a really spicy card. I'm excited to see what this brings. I'm a big lover of Sapphire. I've been trying to make it work since chapter 1, but I have not. I know other people have made it work, but I have never had success in making a Sapphire deck work besides having a lot of fun with it.
It makes me really excited about the potential of just other mechanics or other ink moving mechanics that I've asked about in the past. I remember in our local Discord, set 2, I think, when I realized how fun Sapphire was and looking at my opponent having like 20 ink it sometimes, is like, there's got to be something in the future. I don't know if other card games do it, but if I'm sitting there with half as many ink as my opponent, like I feel like I'm dead in the water, right? So this looks like it's the ramp to some kind of mechanic of moving ink or recycling ink and doing something like that, which is kind of exciting. As the Sapphire player myself, I love it. Andy touched on it with the Tamatoa. I played Monday night with some practice games with a friend, and my first 2 inks were Tamatoa, and he's such a big win condition for the Dime deck that at the rest of the game, you're looking for the remaining 2 Tamatoas that you have in your deck and hoping to find it, let alone the Dime. So the fact that you can play this Mufasa maybe a little bit early with the cost of losing a couple ink, but recycling those previously high-cost cards that you wouldn't see for 8 turns back to your hand, or some of the uninkables like Hades or something that you quilled away, it really spices up the mid to late game with getting those cards back. And then, of course, with the Sapphire just motif, what it does is you just get that ink right back. So I don't feel like it's a bad cost at all to lose that 2 ink for a turn, because you're going to put it right back and probably get some more in the long run. So I'm really excited about it. I don't know if it's more than a 2 of, but it's something that I'm definitely going to play around with. And I did forget to mention at the beginning, it is a legendary, so it's going to be a little bit harder to get. And I think a lot of people are going to make it maybe one of the pricier cards at least the beginning of the set. But
yeah,
I think that's right.
When it first comes out, I wouldn't buy this card. This is probably one of those ones like Lucky Dime, where even if it is a good card, Lucky Dime was really expensive, I believe, at one point, and has come down quite a bit. And some of the other legendaries, even Big Sisu, that started at 4 UBs in everyone's deck, and now it's 1 or 2 UBs, and it has come down probably 50, half price now. So don't immediately jump on the Mufasa train.
Yeah, I think that's wise advice, and we'll see what this brings when it comes out August 9th. It's just right around the corner.
Yeah.
So one last little bit of news here is the Disney Lorcana Challenge. So they just announced, I think maybe today or yesterday, the tickets for Las Vegas will go on sale on Eventbrite on Monday, July 22nd at 8 p.m. Pacific time. So this is a little different than the previous ones. I know they've, said they were going to try to do all this in Melee, but I think they're still having trouble with that. So they're still sticking with Eventbrite for these. Are either of you planning on going to the Vegas TLC?
I'm not. I wish I could, but I think the 2 that I've done are enough for now. If I go to any more this year, it'll probably be Seattle. But yeah.
That's probably the same answer that I'm going to have, although I'm considering buying a ticket just, since they're refundable. And then, that's maybe a little more ammo for me to ask my wife to let me go to Vegas. Like, not only are my friends going, I already have a ticket somehow. Who knows how that got in my cart?
What's interesting to me, and we don't have to go too into it, is that they're doing it at 8 p.m. Pacific time on a Monday night, which is 11 o'clock Eastern time. It's super late
because it's Vegas, right? The other ones went on sale. Atlanta went on sale at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So that's 5 a.m. or something Pacific. I don't know time zones, but that's what I heard, that because it's on the Pacific coast, they went with the Pacific time. I don't know why they went in the evening, but
I think it probably just to give folks, another opportunity. A lot of them were in the morning. If you got a job that you're working, you're not like us that can, kind of
that's fair.
Have another computer up. Don't listen to this. They're not listening. So our employers, no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I think, just allowing more folks to have an opportunity. So I'm a big supporter of that. And then this weekend is weekend 3 of Ursula's Return Set Championships and the DLC Fort Worth. I was going to go to the DLC Fort Worth, but I decided not to, which was fortuitous because I really can't afford it now after my cat, who you may hear on this podcast or see on the video, fortunately had a urinary blockage, so that was a good chunk of change. Thank God they have pet insurance. But with that, we're going to go into our main segment, the Return of Steel Saw. So first, we're going to start with talking about the Game Night Set Championships, which is the store here in the St. Louis area that Brad and I both run their regular league, and so we run their set championship. And so I'm going to actually turn it over to Brad and have him talk a little bit about the set championship.
I was expecting you to do it. So no, what we promote there is like an open play, and we've grown a really good community there, and so I'm really fortunate to have you by my side as well to host this set championship. It was all you, honestly, since I played in it, and you were the judge and taking all the tickets and everything, and you put me on the spot there as you going through all the announcements, and I'm like, I'm just here to play and and socialize with everybody and have a good time. So but no, we had 35 people, and I think it went really smoothly. We had a little discrepancy with the time with somebody, unfortunately, due to our copy and pasting of the last set championship results. So, but ultimately, we started about a half an hour late, but after that, everything went smoothly. 2-game format. I played better than I did the day before, but it still wasn't enough to get to the top cut. But I think we have somebody in our presence who made the top cut and maybe went the distance. Does that sound right, Vince?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not entirely sure. Do we call him the champion or not?
I think we have to. What we're alluding to is
he did get the champion, Matt.
Yeah, he did. And I guess which by the way, his wife is mad that he got
the championship mat and didn't get the other mat.
I'll let him talk about that. But yeah, the point was to congratulate Andy on the first set championship of the trio here. And hand it off to you. How did it feel playing in it?
A lot of fun. I definitely want to first start off with a big shout out. I don't think Brad said enough to Vince for running the whole thing, man in the computer, taking the one or two occasional judge calls after he was finished his game of Angry Birds.
Whoa. You're congratulating me now when this man gave me so much crap on the day of the game.
Survived. Exactly why you deserve the appreciation, Vince. I definitely did give him a hard time. I hand wrote my deck list in my worst handwriting. The uppercase, lowercase, just to make it really sarcastic.
Wow.
But no, it was big thanks to Vince and Brad and the Game Night store for putting it on. I had 39 players in the event, but
4 of them had withdrawn. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
a few folks dropped out, and then we had a few additions, so we were down to like 27, and then we had a few additions day of that added, and so the final total that brought us to was 35 players. Unfortunately, I don't have the breakdown of everybody. I mean, I have all the deck lists, but since folks did it both in digital format and in paper format, I haven't had a chance to kind of like look through and stuff. We know the top 4 decks, which were really great. We had a variety of different decks in the top 4. We had Andy, your Ruby Amethyst. We had a Steel Song, which like should kind of say what the segment here is. We had a Sapphire Steel, and of course my favorite and yours, the Emerald Steel. That is an absolute disdain. Like, so if you're hearing this in your ear holes, if you will, on audio format, you'll know that we're not big fans of Emerald Steel. That is not our favorite. But I'm happy that it was a really great diversity of a top 4, and also we had 2 men and 2 women in our top 4. So also great gender breakdown. And honestly, what was really even funny about that is top 8, 4 men, 4 women. So
beautiful.
I love to see the diversity of folks and decks and everything. That's what brings us and makes us love this game.
That wasn't until Vince split us all up and made us play girls versus girls and boys versus boys.
It was so funny how
it was Melee that did it, but yeah, it did turn out that way. It was a great event. I sort of put together. I went back through my my sheets of paper here with how my games went. I guess to touch on that real quick, one thing I really like to do is write down the round number you're at, the table number you're at if it's at a big enough event. Sometimes they need to know which table number you are. Not all the time are the organizers your podcast co-hosts. So, and then at the end of the match, I write down what kind of deck it was that I played against and the results, so that I have that sort of for my records. But round 1, I played against Bucky, of course. Good friend of mine. We went 1-1. They didn't find the Bucky the first round. I was able to win. I was on the play. Game 2, they were able to get Bucky, and I couldn't get my draw going. So pretty stereotypical there for the Bucky versus Ruby Amethyst matchup. Round 2 was a really interesting one. I played against one of our friends' daughters, who's I think 11 or 12, but very, very good Lorcana player. They were running Amber Amethyst aggro, and I went 1-1 in that matchup as well. I had seen them almost make top cut at a previous event, so I kind of guessed that they were going to be playing that matchup or that deck. So I was able to get a little bit of an edge on it. And
yeah, watch out for those 11-year-olds, man.
I know
they come and get you.
But I was able to get one game. The other one, they had 19 lore on turn 5, I think. turn 5, and I couldn't. There's not cards
Yeesh.
in my deck to to handle that, unfortunately. So went 1-1 there. Played a mirror after that. One of our teammates' spouses played against her Ruby Amethyst, and I was able to 2-0 that. Actually, let me back up here. I did want to highlight this. After round 1, I was 21st. After round 2, tying again, I actually went to 23rd place. And so it was not looking great at the time, but with the 2-game format, sorry, not best of. One of the things I think it really does well is keep you in the event longer. So round 3, I had the mirror match. I went 2-0 in that one, and moved up to 15th place. Round 4, I played against Blue Steel deck. This one was a bit of an odd list, not the very standard one, and I think because of that, they struggled to ramp properly and remove my threats properly. What's up, Brad?
Is that the one where you got the Triton's Decree on you?
Yes, it was. I did get double
see?
Triton's Decreed. I was not in any universe expecting to get double decreed, and it actually happened to both of the games, and to great effect too, I will have you add. However, a broken clock is right twice a day.
Well, I just want to say the mayor's decree, if we will. If you see the mayor out and about at any of your DLCs, he will gladly sign the Triton's decree for you.
Sure.
But yeah, so we had a non-typical blue steel list, but I was able to just ramp past that with Flynn and Castle, and like I said, they didn't quite get the ramp going as they needed to, and they didn't quite have the removal tools that were needed. So I went 2-0 there and finished that round in 6th place. So now we're in the top cut. That's nice. Round 5 though, we started to try and do the math. And unfortunately, I did still need to win this 2-0, or I couldn't intentionally draw. I didn't want a 1-1. It would still make me mathematically possible. I was going against Bucky again. I lucked out in the first round. They didn't find their Bucky. They did find a really interesting line of Robin Hood on 1, Robin Hood on 2, Shift Robin Hood on 3, Shift Robin Hood on 4.
Wow.
Sad Beast on 5, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Luckily, I was able to use one of my Queen's Castles that really had no business being on the board at that moment in time, but I played it anyway, as it was the only thing I could really do. They didn't have their Bucky, so I wasn't really worried about losing the cards, and I was actually able to distract them. I believe twice they attacked with it and could have gotten 4 more lore, and I finished that game out 20-13. So, not exactly that they would have won, but I definitely think if they hadn't gotten distracted by the castle, I might have fallen 1-1 there. But winning that one put me in 2nd place and allowed me to tie with a good friend of mine who was playing Steel Song. A little foreshadowing on that, but we tied in the 6th round, and I actually ended up in 1st going into the quarterfinals, into the top cut. And my old pal Amber Amethyst came back in round 1 of the quarterfinals. Another really good buddy of mine, not the same person as before. Another good buddy of mine was running a different Amber Amethyst list. Basically, the same thing happened. I was lucky to know that that's what they were running. I mulliganed for it. I was able to survive and win one game. Flynn and the castle again do work. There's not very many big attack people in those decks. The second game, same exact thing as before. They got to like 19 lore on turn 5 or something, and I just couldn't get through it. But luckily was able to pull it through in game 3. Semifinals against Blue Steel. That was again went to 3 games. I got a whole new worlded in the second game, and they Tamatoa dimed me for the win. They had a really nasty board. They did a really good job of not questing. It was odd because if I had the threats, if I had the answers to their threats, I could have removed them and maybe they would have gotten little to no value out of them, but they kept 2 Smees and an Aerial unexerted for like 2 or 3 turns and was able to get like 15 lore in 1 turn or something. It was really rough, but pulled that one through. That person, it was hard for me to win that game because you guys both know them. They're the nicest person that has ever played the game of Lorcana, and were rooting for me to win from the moment I sat down to play the game, which is an unusual experience, but honestly not really. A lot of the people in this community are really nice, but I did want to give a big shout out to my semifinal opponent there for being, as I noted here, nicest Lorcana player in existence, and an extremely well-seasoned blue steel player as well.
Yeah, trust me, I know. I lost against that different variant of that deck at a different championship in set 3, and it was just brutal. Yeah,
and
very great, very good player.
The finals against Steel Song. I had actually played this same person, same deck list, the night or the day prior at another set championships, and we won in like round 4 or something of Swiss. And so we both decided, hey, in an effort of time, and because we're both starving, how about we just play that 3rd game, and finish it off and play the 1 game. And I was lucky enough to come out on top of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of brings us to, like Vince said, is
the return of Steel Song. Yeah. I will just add, so this happens a lot in these tournaments, whereas, the top 4 get the Ursula and, or the whatever set championship card is. That's how it worked in Inklands. And then the top 2, there's mats. There's a champion mat, and the runner-up gets a regular mat. And a lot of times that final game, people don't play it. They're like, we've played all day. I'm ready to leave, and I need food. These events are long and taxing. And that's actually what you two were going to do. You were just going to, and then you were going to roll for it. And then ultimately, like, your opponent was like, no, I want to earn it. I want, if we're going to, so they were like, we'll just say that this is game 3. We're going 1-1, and they played it. So, which I'm glad you did. I thought that was, a really great way to do it, as they were trying to kick us out.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was a really great way to get us in trouble for running over time on the event there.
They had something else going on, so I didn't feel so bad about it. But I would be lying if I didn't say I was rooting for the dice roll. But I'm happy to see it play out.
Trust me, I was starving. I was I want out of here. But I'm really grateful that they provide that space. But yeah, as Andy said, this Steel Song deck just kind of came out of nowhere. Like, it was a popular deck that was run in pretty much, I want to say, since Rise of the Bloodborne.
Set 1.
Was it set 1 too?
Oh, yeah. It's the Aerial Whole New World combo at the core.
That's right. That's right.
One of our teammates used to play it and was...
Yep. That's why I hated it.
He was
I could not beat him
for sure.
He
was a villain for sure at our locals.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a really interesting thing you mentioned. Has been around for a while because that is one of the things that, at least for our friend that got second at game night there, their list had, I think, 4 cards from the newest set. So some of these Steel Song lists I've seen are essentially the same list you were seeing last set or the set before.
He's got 5 from the new set.
5? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we're kind of seeing that just old Steel Song just kind of works, right? Everyone stopped thinking it was going to get played. They stopped teching against it. They didn't care. They forgot about it because what happened? They got 5 cards,
Yep. Like you did at the day before. I played him first game of the set championship on Saturday and was expecting his Steel Amethyst that he's been running the last couple weeks, and I was like, okay, he's practicing with this, and I saw it Wednesday night at league night, and he sat down, and I'm like, okay, I know what to mulligan for, I think. I mean, I shouldn't expect, but and sure as crap, he bare necessity my quill and everything, and all the opportune moments to just destroy my ramp and my songs, and I was left 0-2, and it was the quickest game and just to really set the mood for the rest of the day. I'm like, okay, we're starting this off with 0-2 against a Steel Song deck that I was not prepared for, and I was expecting him to go the whole way. I think he made top cut on Saturday too. I don't know if
he did. So no, he didn't make it a top 4 though. But
Okay.
I play with him regularly at a different store than Game Night weekly, and so every week for this, he's been trying to come up with a new deck, and so we're there the game store on Saturday, and he's like trying to think between Ruby Amethyst or this Steel Song deck. And ultimately, like, another friend of mine, him and I were talking, and we were like, we expect a lot of Bucky here. I would probably not run Ruby Amethyst because that is one of its worst matchups. I don't know if I'd say it's the worst, but it's pretty close, I think, up there with being one of its worst matchups.
For sure.
Especially if they get that, great nuts kind of draw of the Diablo, Bucky, Shift Diablo, or even the Aladdin to start that discard package off for you.
Right.
But and so he's like, fine, Steel Song it is. And it was funny because he brought this deck to a different variation of it to Chicago for the DLC. And like, I just wrecked him in our test matches the day before. I did, our friend did, another guy did. And he was like, never mind. He's like, immediately switched to Ruby Amethyst. And so like, we just kind of thought it was dead, and the only real, I think, sign that the Steel Song was still alive was Zach Bivens. He, I think, made it into, I don't know if it was a top 16 in Chicago, but I know he made top cut 64, and I'm guaranteed he made top 32. I'm fairly certain he made top 16, but I can't 100% say that he did. But he's a big Steel Song player in the Lorcana community, and this deck just kind of died. And so seeing it come back is just great. And also seeing it come back with, some not that many new cards in this, it just goes to show you that, you can use a deck from a previous set and bring it into a championship or, these set championships. And do really, really well at it. So, I think. Go on, Andy.
Those cards were in there for a reason. That core of that deck doesn't inherently get any less powerful. So I think it was a great meta call from our friend to bring that to both events that they played this weekend, making top cut in both. I think it was definitely spicy and paid off pretty well.
Oh yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. And I would just add too, like, this is not a stock standard Steel Song deck. Like, I even look through some. For one, there aren't a lot of Steel Song decks in ink decks that I've seen, in different tournaments as I was like looking. And this is not a deck you're going to see anywhere. It's one that he worked on. He took inspiration from from few articles. I was talking about it the other day, and actually today at another game store about it. And he knows we're talking about this today, so I was like, you gotta listen to the podcast. I'm shamelessly plugging it everywhere I can. And so it just goes to show, like, the way you do it is just test yourself and do that. And one of the things, like, was really interesting that I saw him do today at the game store, which I think is like really great way to just become a better player, is just really anticipating. So like, sometimes you can't find another person to play with all the time, and it's hard to like play by yourself, but you can anticipate different moves. So like, he was just like playing out his deck, and turn 7, he's like, I'm just going to assume they have the Be Prepared, and like, what's my response to that? And so thinking that through. And so that's why he had cards in there like the Flute, because the Flute is that answer to the board wipe, because if that goes off the board, he still has board presence to advance your win condition of getting that lore gain. It's like, so he's all these kind of answers to try to counter what's in the meta at a given time, and to be able to advance his win condition and deal with the opponent's board state. And I just think it's a really smart way to think about the game and practice that game. Because yes, I think in-person practice is by far going to be your best bet. These webcams, whether it be Real Play Network or it be Pixelborn Connect, or just even like doing, Discord with a group of folks, which is what we do when we have time. But also, but if you don't have that, just sitting at your desk or sitting, at home or a coffee shop or whatever with your deck and just thinking through those key plays, like what does your mulligan look like? And so I see here that we've got, just a couple of things about, different certain variations here. So Andy, you want to walk us through some of that?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of have a discussion about some of the different tech. You mentioned the flute already as sort of a persistent threat to end the game with that lore. I think my wife actually played against the same person from game night and said that they went from like 14 or 15 all the way to 20, just one a turn, play a song, use a flute, play a song, use a flute. But the other interesting option, or the other option for that is like locations. We saw a lot of Pride lands in the previous sets as sort of the location. It's in that 2-drop uninkable slot. So I think last set a lot of times we even had like the Pride lands version versus the flute version, and then some of them even ran like the lantern, the other 2-drop uninkable card. But one thing our friend ran was Underworld. So it's a 2-drop inkable location. I believe it has 6 body, 2 to move it there. And whenever someone quests while there, you can pay 3 to bring someone back from the dead, essentially.
And it has passive lore of 1.
And passive lore of 1. So I immediately gave him the classic villain Andy response of, "Oh, that card's terrible." I do like the ability to reanimate cards from your discard and get them back into your hand. I think it's incredibly expensive. You aren't, it dies to Maui right away, so it's not as strong as something like the Pride lands. You aren't really able to gain as much benefit off of it right away. Something like Pride lands, you can move someone into it and they immediately get that extra willpower, which can help prevent them from, getting hit with a grab sword or a Zeus or something like that. But it was a really interesting addition to see. And I believe, I don't know if you talked to him or not, Vince, but I know that he was very excited to see the Underworld's performance at the set championships. He said it was like an MVP of his deck. It worked very, very well. So it's hard to argue with results, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think we might have to consider just bringing him on the show to talk us through some of these tests on the deck here. But the way I view that card in that particular deck, right, is that it's an answer to the discard, right? Like, obviously, Pride Lands is the better card. Like, I don't think there's any arguing that if you're looking location in a 2-drop slot, you would rather have Pride Lands over the Underworld. But the thing about Underworld that is underrated, if you will, is that it's inkable, and so if you need ink to advance to play another character, like, you don't need that location, and you've got high inkables in this deck already, you want to be able to ink. But then if, hey, it's like somebody's discarding all your cards, that's a great card to get out on your 2-drop. You've got actually a lot of 1-drops in the Steel Song package. You've got your 1-drop Cinderella. I think is it Robin Hood's a 1-drop as well. So you can move them over, get a character back, back from your discard to try to advance your win condition, right? And so yeah, it's expensive, but like when you're looking for outs in a game, you want to take every out that you've got available. And in some cases, I think this card is good. And in a game, I think the answer would be is if you're playing a Ruby Amethyst match, you're not going to play this, right? Because it's going to get Maui'd, right? You're just gonna ink this. This is an inkable card. And now you could argue, like, would I maybe rather have a card that's more flexible amongst a greater variety of decks? Maybe, and like you said, I think results show for themselves. But I think the reason that this is in here instead of say Pride Lands is because it's inkable and because it has useful value in very specific matches, and in the matches that it's not, you just ink it. And like I said, I don't know that that's a play particularly that I would do. And I will say, I think that that's where diving into the discussion a little bit is that I would say is like the one reason I think we don't see a lot of Steel Song, and I'm still not convinced about it, even though we've seen its success here, is it is a very, very difficult deck to pilot successfully.
Yeah, and it can be very hit or miss as well. I mean, the main bulk of the deck, that it revolves around that whole new world and being able to refresh your hand and then create a massive board presence while controlling with all of these songs. So one of the games I took on our friend was they were stuck with 2 whole new worlds in hand and nothing on board and 6 ink, and they top decked that second whole new world and said, hardcast it, fine, I guess I have to. And that was not ideal for them, and that's, I think, sort of been the downfall of a whole new world. It's why my wife stopped playing it. I think it's why our teammates stopped playing it, was they didn't like the inconsistency of having to be able to reliably get a whole new world to continue the game, essentially.
Yeah, and I think it's a hard deck to build your pool of ink to be able then to, like, you want to have the last thing you want as a Steel Song player is to have to hard cast a whole new world. You absolutely want to sing it, because that's what your characters are designed to do, and that allows you then to have a full hand that you can play from. And the moment that you have to play it, just hard cast it, is the moment you fall behind in the game, unless you have some other win condition on the board. Like if you have flutes on the board, like you probably maybe get away with it if your opponent's really far behind. Like, I'm not saying it's a loss, but you are now putting yourself, even if you were at an advantage, you've now given your opponent a weakness to take advantage of, which is, for me, like, we've got this question here. It's like, would you take this to a challenge? Like if you were going to Fort Worth, would you take this? Would you consider playing this in a set championship? And honestly, I will say I have 2 different answers for this. If I was going to Fort Worth, no, I would not take it. I think it's too inconsistent. I think there are better decks that are more consistent in the meta. And I think that's why we've seen that, right, repeatedly, that Emerald Steel, for all the disdain I have for that Bucky, which I cannot wait until it is fully errated on August 9th, is it's like I'm counting down the days, is that, I would not take it, right? Ruby Amethyst is a better, I think, deck. I think, Steel Sapphire is a better deck. I even think Ruby Sapphire is a better deck. Like, I think there's a reason why we see these other decks perform so consistently well over and over and over again. Now, in a set championship, maybe, I think you mentioned, Andy, like, this is the right meta call, not only once, but twice for him. To have a deck make top 8 twice and top 2, really, right, at game night, I think is astounding. And I think gives one pause to think about that this is a deck that can be truly played in a set championship where the meta is a little bit more diverse and players aren't maybe as, good. And listen, I don't want to deny how good this deck is, because our friend here beat, who I think we would all agree is one of the best players of Lorcana in St. Louis, who top 32'd in Chicago, beat him not only once but twice in the event with this deck. And so, I mean, just tells you what an incredible player he is and what an incredible deck he was able to build based on his forecasting of the meta going on. So what do you think? Would you play this? Would you? What's your answer?
I wouldn't unless I had a lot of practice because I do not. I've been relatively quiet in this conversation because I just don't have the experience of Steel Song to feel comfortable with it. I'm looking at his deck right now, and I like a lot of the synergies, like the guaranteed damage on Smee and Lawrence. I think is really interesting because got the Rapunzel coming in the next turn to heal him up and give him his strength back, and and then all the big bodies like Robin Hood and Tink. I'm looking at the list and seeing how spicy it is, and I want to play it, but I wouldn't be comfortable playing it for a long time. And I only have 2 flutes, which is what he's running, and what I think won him that game in that semifinal was, and I watched the last couple actions play out, and that player that you were talking about made his last quester reckless, so he wouldn't get the win on the next turn, but he drew that song to pop that flute and get that final lore, and it's like, those conditions that make this that make this deck win are there. So to answer your question, I would not take it to Dallas this weekend. I would need like a full month of hard, like a good feel for it and how it feels against blue red and blue steel and ruby amethyst for sure, which I'm sure I'd get plenty of practice with both of you guys on that matchup. But yeah, that's my answer, Vince. What about you, Andy?
Yeah, I think that one thing I will say, you said he only has 2 flutes in there. That's really odd. I think that that says even more. I'm not even mad. I'm impressed, right? Like that. It seems to me like that Steel Song, even the iteration our friend was running and had such success on, is not fully refined or a perfect deck list. There never really is a perfect one, but I immediately am thinking like, oh, I would have 4 flutes, and again, I said about the underworld and stuff, but that just more so says of how good of a pilot that he is, especially since Vince said they were playing other decks previously. But I would maybe consider playing this. I do have a strong desire to try and play a different deck at every single event, and do really well with each one. But that's just kind of a weird thing for me. But I would maybe recommend this to like blue steel players. So if you kind of like blue steel, but you don't really like ramping, this is kind of a similar deck. It has harder
I
mulligan
don't
decisions.
agree
You don't
with
agree?
that. Oh no! But I'm
looking at the steel part. I'm familiar with the steel enough, but I don't know that I would know what to do with all the amber singers in replacement of the, or at least in the right situation. I'm sure I could figure it out, but I shouldn't have.
I should say this. I don't recommend anyone just like switch their deck and, like we've said before, play what you're comfortable with. So maybe this is something if you aren't playing in this weekend set championships,
unless you're Andy and you decide just to randomly pick up a steel amethyst deck.
But the way I see it is, you throw away the ink decisions and the ramp decisions that you have in the blue steel deck, and you trade them for maybe some more mulligan decisions. But from a 30,000 foot view, you're essentially doing the same thing of playing characters and either questing with them and pushing towards 20 lore and forcing your opponent to answer you, or you're controlling the board with your steel songs, essentially with your damage. The difference is that you have to actually sort of march your way to 20, unlike blue steel where you just kind of survive and then all of a sudden you win because you have four Tamatoas and 2 dimes out on the board or whatever.
I don't know anything about that.
That's overkill. You just need one of those big babies.
Right. So you have to sort of march to 20 as well, but I could see someone who enjoys the idea of songs, right? Enjoying Steel Song as well, and it kind of maxes that out, right? You're you are looking for good value characters in Blue Steel to sing those songs. Well, every character in Amber has great value for singing those songs. There's so many singer targets. Playing, play testing it the other day, being able to sing Storm Rage on turn 2 with a Cinderella against their Flynn or their Diablo that they shifted or whatever they've got out there feels really, really nice to draw
I
a
agree
card,
with
right?
I agree with that line, right? Like, you're talking about like cheating it out kind of. And I think
Yeah.
Sapphire does that. They cheat out characters, really, not so much songs. Whereas, that Steel song is really trying to cheat out those characters, whether it be like you said, the Strength of a Raging Fire, or help me out here. What's the other big song? Not
Swords.
A Whole New World. Swords is a 5.
Zeus and the Storm.
Storm. You've got the Ariel, who's a singer 5, right? Who can do swords and
You can do any of it.
Whole
The
New
highest cost
World.
song is a 5. Yeah.
Can do them all, right? And so she comes out as a 3, and basically that's on par with, I think, where the Sapphire Steel is, right? They're cheating it out, but they're doing it differently. They're doing it either like one jump or fishbone or
right. They're cheating
Mickey. They're cheating the ink out to do it.
Right. And they almost, I think you're right. I think on the same turn. So on 3, no, I guess it would be 4 that you're able to put your. Actually, no, Steel Song gets to it a lot faster, right? Because Ariel on 3,
that's right.
Sing 5 on 4. You'd have to like one jump and then one jump again, I guess, or one jump in Fishbone lets you. So you can't get someone out there on turn 3 that can then sing on turn 4 A Whole New World or anything like that, like you can in in Steel Song with Blue Steel. So you get to those songs faster.
And you can play Big Pink on 4, but you wouldn't be able to sing until 5, which is when Whole New World is.
Well, if you shifted it, no, you're right. If you shifted it, but nobody plays that line.
But nobody shifted. Yeah, I'm talking about hardcast Tink on 4 is what my
or
line
hardcast song, right?
Yeah.
I'm set on the idea though that I think like Steel Song is just a really hard deck to pilot. But I want to go back to, I think, something you said, Andy, that I think is, you talk about wanting to play all these different decks. And talking with our friend who built this deck, one of the things he mentioned to me was him building all these other decks and playing them made him so much of a better player in building this and doing it, because he can anticipate. He can know it's like, okay, they're on 6 ink. If it's a Ruby Amethyst player, I gotta be worried about Medusa, Tremaine. It's like these are the threats that are on the board. Turn 7, I'm worried about be prepared. The same, you ask him the same about these other decks, he can name off all these threats. And really, like, as a Ruby Amethyst player myself, right, like, I think about the game from the perspective of the Ruby Amethyst player, like, what threats am I worried about? But I haven't really played as much of these other decks to know exactly how they work, to think about them in that same way. And I mean, I think, if you have got the time to build these decks and try them out, I think that's also a great way to practice. Yep.
One of the best things I think either you or Andy or both of you have said in the past that I've held on to is to actually play not only with the deck that you want to play, but play with the deck that you're up against, that you want to learn against, because you're going to be able to not only from experience of playing against it, see what they're going to do, but from your own perspective, what would I do in this situation with the cards that I have? So, maybe just switch decks with like one night. If me and you, Vince, wanted to switch, I play your Ruby Amethyst and you play my Blue Steel, you would get a different perspective of what I'm looking at any given time, and it helps anticipate.
Why is a Triton's Decree in this deck again?
It's not in there anymore.
What you do is you do gauntlets, or I think is what they call them, right? It's like a form of focused practice, and you ideally find someone that plays the same deck as you, right? So me and Vince, most recently I've been playing Ruby Amethyst. Vince plays Ruby Amethyst. Me and him would meet up one night, or get on webcam or something like that, and we would recognize like the 3 or 4 biggest meta decks, the things we're expecting to see at our event, and we'd build those decks, and we would play. Vince would play Ruby Amethyst, and I would play every one of those other meta decks against him, so that he would get all of the practice against those meta decks. And then we would flip, and I would play Ruby Amethyst, and he would play all those meta decks. And what ends up happening is you get practice on every meta deck against your deck, not just against a random other deck, which is less valuable practice. And then you get to play your deck against all of those decks. And I actually definitely owe a shout out to my wife for, I was that practice partner with her. And while I hadn't been playing Ruby Amethyst, she has been for quite a long time. And I've been playing all of these other decks against Ruby Amethyst, and watching her be able to, we would work through the lines and what the problems were, why she was losing these matchups, and watching her be able to eventually beat me when I was playing all of these other decks, Bucky being the last one. And the real nail in the coffin for me was watching her be able to consistently beat Bucky in practice. Made me realize that Ruby Amethyst is, it is our savior. It is the light. It is the way, my friend. And it brought me my first championship for this set. So I'm a huge fan of that sort of focused practice, and playing your deck against other decks and seeing how well it does.
Yeah, I think that's right. Any last thoughts about Steel Song?
I'm excited to see how it evolves. There's even other cards on this list that we didn't even talk about. There's a million other options that can go into it, and can make the list really spicy. And if you're someone who likes tinkering with a deck and putting together a good list, it's one to look at for sure.
I'm good.
What about you, Brad? Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. All right. Well, as always, moving on to the next segment, Villain of the Week. And this week we have the Queen's Castle Mirror Chamber. It's a location, rare card in Amethyst, 4 cost inkable, 1 move cost, 7th strength, and 2 lore gained at the beginning of your turn. And the ability is using the mirror. At the start of your turn, for each character you have here, you may draw a card. This, I think, is the bane of anybody that goes up against any Amethyst deck, but particularly Ruby Amethyst and Steel Amethyst players, because this is where this card is mostly found right now. So yeah, it's the Villain of the Week, because it certainly won me a few games. So I love this card. I'm a big fan. Unless I'm playing against it and they drop 3 of them, which did happen on Saturday against a Steel Amethyst player. I was like, oh no! I thought I was going to win this round too, and then they were like, castle. I was like,
yeah, I triple castled someone as well. I was like, I'm really sorry.
It feels so bad. We talked about it, I think, briefly last week, where we had a league night at your store, Vince, and yeah, I had to get through all 4 castles and still lose that game. Like I managed to
get all 4 out.
I managed to get them banished, between Rise of the Titans and just whatever damage I could put on them. But it was just by the time that we got to the end game, they had already accumulated so much lore from just their presence on board. I don't know how much draw you actually got from it, but it's so hard to keep up with unless you're playing some kind of Ruby, rush. Some kind of rush character like Maui, who's a staple in all Ruby decks, to deal with those. And he doesn't even deal with it in one shot. You have to use 2 characters or some kind of boost to take it out. It is absolutely insane. And when people say it's the best location in the game, it's for good reason. And you get so much from it with the draw and the 2 passive lore. 2 passive lore per turn. Yep. That it's a must in any Amethyst deck.
I mean, but Andy has a spicy take on how to take it out.
Oh, and it's a good one.
Honestly, I certainly do not have the reach or the presence to claim that I started this trend, but I definitely was early on the Hercules train.
Yeah.
he's a 5-cost uninkable 7/3 rush reckless. So Maui, but uninkable, and 1 more attack, 2 less strength. Which really you don't care about the strength at all. But
Willpower.
willpower.
The strength is
Sorry.
yeah. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah,
So
you're
the
saying
willpower.
strength.
I actually had that in my Ruby Amethyst deck in Chicago, and literally one of my opponents, like, I thought they were going to call Judge. They didn't know what the card was. They were like, "What? That is crazy! I've never seen that played before. That is really, really good." So, the clean takeout of the castle is nice. And now I've seen one of our buddies who our teammates who I was deck testing with earlier today. He's running 1, considering going back to 2, I think, even, or going up to 2. I saw Moyen from Podkana. His list that won him, I believe, 3 set championships has one of them in there. So it's an uninkable. You got to find a spot for it in a very, very crowded red-blue deck usually. And I don't know if that it's good in Ruby Amethyst, honestly.
Yeah, I was going to ask, would you put this in Ruby Amethyst? Would you take a Maui out?
No.
And put one in? Tech one in?
No. I considered it because my wife had 4 Mauis and I only had 3. I lost one of them apparently, and I wasn't allowed to use our enchanted Maui. So I considered just running 3 Mauis and 1 Hercules, but really Ruby Amethyst doesn't care about the mirror castle. You got to play it at a better time than them. Really, you'll just go faster than them. If they play their castle, you play your castle, and then you kind of deal with it later. It's not as big of a deal, I feel like. Because you're usually not as far behind, and you usually always have other characters on board. So the Maui plus something else is plenty fine for it. But in red blue, being able to take that out immediately after they've gone Flynn, Sisu. If you think about it, the Flynn Sisu castle line for something like red blue, they have to brawl a turn late, or they have to Pegasus now is the big one that they're doing. Turn 2 Pegasus to stop the Flynn. Turn 3 brawl the Flynn, because they can't stop the Sisu with a bigger character, or play your own Sisu. And then turn 4, the castle comes down. You don't really have an answer to that. So ideally, you've found a spot to ramp in there, maybe seeing 1 jump with your Pegasus, and you're at 5 at that point. You could play your Hercules, not your Maui. Although I guess if you have the Pegasus, the Maui works fine too. But, there's a lot of different lines to it. But yeah, it just sort of goes to show the lengths that we're having to work towards here for
Right.
Queen's Castle. And if you think about it, there aren't really many other locations played, right? So all of this is for 1,
Honestly, I mean, aside from our discussion on Steel Song, the only location that comes to mind that's really run significantly is Hidden Cove and the Emerald, Steel matchup, which really, is annoying, but doesn't have the same, I think, value for, I would not tech to try to get a removal option. I would run Rise of Titans for if Hidden Cove were, in the only location of the game. I don't think we'd see Rise of Titans in the game. I don't think it's that annoying, particularly. Whereas, you have to have that in your deck because of Queen's Castle, right? We don't even see, which I think is another actually decent location, not nearly as good because it doesn't have an ability, but is McDuck Manor. We saw a lot of that in Chapter 3, and you've seen people try to maybe think, can I add one in my, red-blue deck? Can I do it in my, steel sapphire deck?
Do it.
And
we're
not
literally
seeing
me.
It, though.
Over the weekend for both sets, I didn't put it in. I thought really hard about. I really wanted, for whatever reason. I think it was you, Andy, when we played on the past Thursday night for League, that you mentioned something about McDuck Manor, and in my mind, I'm like, that would be a sneaky card to throw in for the sets this weekend, and make somebody have to deal with that. And so I set it all out Saturday morning before our first set championship, and was like, I had it sitting there for, I think, a beast hard-headed, but then I started tinkering with all this other stuff too, and was like, I'm comfortable with my deck how it is, and if I tweak it day of, I know it's going to screw me because the time that I pull the McDuck Manor is going to be when I would have wanted the card that it replaced, or something. So of course it's all situational, but it was sitting here and it was ready to go in my deck, and I ultimately refrained from doing it. But back in set 3, I did run 1 or 2 of in my red and blue because that 9 body on it with the 2 lore makes people have to deal with it.
I mean, you know what you could do, Brad? You could run 61 cards.
I could, and I thought about it.
Manor.
I thought about it, but then I feel like I'd be shamed off the podcast.
I told Andy that I ran 61 cards at Bodex.
Did you tell him what it was?
Was it the spell book?
No.
It
was Forbidden Mountain.
It was Forbidden Mountain.
What?
It got like
what
4 or 5 lore off of it from me. Yeah.
It's a 2 location inkable, and it just gains 1 passive lore.
1 passive lore. That's all it is.
What's his willpower?
6.
6.
Yeah. Yeah, he just threw it in for giggles.
Yeah.
Like Ruby Amethyst?
Yep.
Ruby Amethyst.
I would have done Agrabah. Get Agrabah.
Get 2
5
of them,
body, 2 lore, and it's only 3 cost, I think.
Oh, yeah, I think I was, what I was doing was just looking at that 2 cost slot, and I was like, what can I do? And honestly, it was for funsies anyway, so it didn't,
Right.
I mean, I agree generally in principle that any card over 61 makes sure.
He chuckled when he played it too.
But, well, because I got the same reaction from everybody when I put that card out, which I did play it in 3 of the 5 matches. Is like, what does that card do again?
I should say, like, running over 60 cards when testing and stuff too is not nearly as bad, right? If you're headed out to locals to test with a friend, ideally if you're doing the more focused practice, you narrow that down to a 60 card list, and you just make a little more dramatic changes. Like you take a card out, you take 2 or 3 cards out, put 2 or 3 cards in, and see how those ones fit in or something. But running over to try and get a feel for a couple extra cards or something is not terrible. And honestly, if you can't decide and you run over 60 cards, we will still let you listen to the podcast. We still love you either way. But you are making it harder for yourself, to say the least.
Yeah. So why do you think the Queen's Castle is the only real location that's played? I mean, we did talk a little bit about Hidden Cove, but why don't we see... Into the Inklings was like all about locations. And 1 set later, we're in Ursula's Return, and we see 1 location played from Chapter 3, and 1 into the Inklands, and we see 1 location done, in set 4 with Ursula's Return with Hidden Cove.
If we're being fair, I think locations should have been in the game since the beginning. I think they saved it for set 3 just to ease everybody into, like, the new players to TCGs into this, because it's a brand new concept, right? The set 3 even came with rule cards in every pack on how locations work instead of throwing it.
I want my puzzle piece, Mr. Ravensburger.
I do. But the Queen's Castle, the value that you get for it at the cost that it costs. The ink that it costs, I think, is what makes it the best. You get 2 lore for 4 ink, and it only costs 1 single ink to move somebody there, right? So a lot of the other ones, the ones that I really like in Emerald, when I was big into Emerald, was Fang, but it's also a 4 cost with 2 lore on it, but it costs 2 ink to move people there, and it's just easily it's got a 6 body. So Maui just comes and takes it right out. So when you can't deal with the people at that location because of the ward and the evasive, they'll just like, okay, we'll just take out your location and knock that out and knock out your people next turn or this turn with something else, right? So it takes more of an effort to get rid of the castle, and you're getting 2 lore for it at the start of each turn, so the people are incentivized to take that out and not quest. And you get additional draws from it too. So you play your rabbit into the castle, and then you already got your bounce package, but there's so much draw coming out of that amethyst package with the castle now that it's just it it begs for it to be answered, and so that's why it's the number one location in my opinion, and probably a lot of others. Andy,
Yeah. The if you look at it, Fang, is that inkable?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
so it's
is
inkable,
inkable.
but it has lower. It gets hit by Maui, like you
yeah,
said.
six
So
body. Yep.
7 is sort of that breaker where, at least until Hercules came out, nothing could really like instantly take that out. And so, but when you look at something like what's the RLS Legacy or even
Yep.
McDuck Manor, also in that 4 slot. So RLS is uninkable, and it gets you 1 extra willpower on it, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
it goes to 8 willpower.
Yep.
You don't need that 8, right? 7 was enough, right? And still, for the most part, is, because Maui is a very easy addition to a deck. Hercules is a much more difficult addition to a deck. Um, Same with McDuck. Like, getting that extra willpower is not really as valuable. So the castle is in sort of that sweet spot where it's inkable and gets you 2 lore. That's insane. And then the castle is only 1 to move. That's insane. And then the ability is really good. Like, it's just sort of good on top of great on top of excellent. They loaded it up with a lot of stuff. I definitely think it could have afforded to have been like uninkable or something like
Yeah.
that.
In the end, right? Card draw is king in any of these kind of games, and
Huge.
that just provides you more card draw in an already draw heavy package. So yeah.
I mean, I think unless you can other locations. So I think one of the reasons why in particular McDuck Manor doesn't see play is because it doesn't have an ability to put it on the board. So if you take a card out to put, trade in, you've got to think about like what you're potentially giving away by adding that card into your deck. Whereas like, it makes sense in the Ruby Amethyst and basically if you're running Amethyst, unless you're running a low to the ground aggro-esque deck, you want to put this castle in. Like, if you're running that Steel Amethyst, Ruby Amethyst, you're going to put 4 castles in because, at worst, the worst possible case is you're just trying to distract your opponent to, so force them to attack your thing so you could find answers. Best case scenario, you're putting it on the board, you're using that like last 1 ink that you wouldn't use to move your character over there, getting a free draw, extra draw, and then your next turn, and taking full value of it. You don't get that with the McDuck Manor. It gets you nothing. You could spend, I think it's even 2 to move to McDuck Manor, right?
Yeah.
And you don't even get anything for that unless a character ability has something to do that. We haven't really seen a lot of interactions in the meta value that, maybe with the exception of RLS Legacy and Jim Hawkins, to cheat both of those out.
Right.
But even then, you look at RLS Legacy, and that costs 3 to move to.
Unless somebody's there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Right. So, I just think about how all these like mechanics work and what the value it brings. So, to kind of like wrap this up. So, what do we think if you were to, would you A, ban it, not ban it? B,
No.
how would you errata this to make it better or to make it more fair? If
better.
You will?
My first thought would be reduce the lore count to 1. I think everything on it's good. It requires, to deal with it. And you got to find the answers for it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I would think if they wanted to make any change to it, maybe either increase the cost of moving somebody there or reduce the passive lore by 1.
I would say, yeah. I was gonna say it needs to cost 2 to move someone there. I think. I do want to shout out the McChicken deck, which used Hey Hey and the McDuck Manor to make the McChicken deck, and you'd move the Hey Hey to the McDuck Manor, and the opponent would lose lore. It was a spicy red blue list from last set that the PowerPoint presentation I watched on it was incredibly convincing. The results were not, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I think I would make it 2 to move there. But honestly, I wouldn't mind just seeing a few more answers, right? Like, if 7 willpower was easier to handle, then it would be less of an insta add to any amethyst deck, really.
Yeah. I mean, I think, though, I'm fine with as it is. I don't think I would change or errata this. I think you both raise some pretty fair points, but I think the fact that we don't see a ton of locations of the game is an indication that actually locations should probably be spicier, if you will. Like, maybe not all of them. Obviously, not every card is going to be, but it'd be nice to see some spicier locations in there. I think the only time that this really becomes a challenge is when you get multiple castles on the board, and then I think it becomes like deadly for your opponent.
Yeah, multiple castles, or even just like the ability on it. That's why I said move 2 to move to it, right? Because if you get a castle out and you don't move anyone there, it's the same as a McDuck Manor, right? It's just getting you these 2 passive lore. While granted, the Ruby Amethyst is going to be going faster, so that 2 lore is probably like 10, 12, 14 ticking away. Whereas red blue, it might be 4, 6, 8 or something. But I think when you play a castle later in the game, right? You be prepped on 7, or this is a bad example, but when you play a castle and you immediately also move like all 3 of your people over there, right? And you have 3 people in the castle and you pass turn, that becomes such an immediate must answer by your opponent. Drawing 4 cards on your next turn is like such a nail in the coffin. So like it I think the insane amount of instant card draw, like next turn card draw you can threaten with that is too much, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, my question to you is so if that were the case, if it were to you were to add make it card stays the same, the only thing that increases is that cost too. Would you still play 4 of them in Ruby Amethyst? Is it still the same must-have card it is today?
Probably not. I would consider less of them. Yeah, I think it's still a really really good card, but I think one of the reasons locations aren't more popular is because they tend to be negative tempo, right? If you play a location and your opponent plays something to stop that location, 9 times out of 10, the thing they have to stop that location still exists, right? You play a Robin Hood, you play a Sad Beast, you play any character on board, and you half the time or a lot of the time you're taking out that character with one of your own, right? You are sacrificing something off of your board for it, whereas with a location, your opponent, you played 2, 3 castles at the wrong time, and next thing you know, you're looking at a board where you got 6 lore off your castles or whatever, but now your opponent has 3 Robin Hoods and 2 Jafars and an Aladdin, and you're like, you have a huge board and I can't do anything, right? So I personally want to see less locations. Not like I want to see other good ones, right? I want to see more variety, but I want to stop seeing enchanted locations. Why are there so many enchanted locations, but not not as many enchanted songs, there's many enchanted items? We don't, or enchanted actions, we don't get those as many, but all of a sudden now locations, there's got to be like 2 or 3 enchanteds every set.
I feel like the enchanted locations happened because they introduced them in the same set, right? And now we have songs and actions coming out as well. We had Zeus last set, we got Bruno this set, and then a few others. So
we get the hat.
We could spend an entire podcast delving into that, which we may do in the future on our hot spicy takes. But you let us know, listener. Would you ban Queen's Castle, or do you think it's fine? Would you errata it? What do you think of the takes that are on this podcast? And with that, we'll say if you've enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We're also on YouTube, so please be sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified of our next episode. Until next week, stay safe, fellow villains. Be wary of wannabe heroes who want to disrupt your villainous plans. And as always, remember the rules of villainy.